Warning: the following content may contain elements that are not suitable for some audiences. Accordingly, viewer discretion is advised. Ted was charming. He was handsome. He had a law degree. He volunteered at a suicide hotline. He was described by people who knew him as warm, intelligent, and charismatic. He was also one of the most prolific and calculating serial killers in American history. Ted Bundy murdered at least 30 women and girls across 7 states. He escaped from custody twice. He represented himself at trial, cross-examining the witnesses he had tried to kill. He fathered a child on death row. And on the morning of his execution, thousands of people gathered outside the prison to celebrate. What made Bundy uniquely terrifying was not the scale of his crimes. It was the face he put in front of them. This is Ted Bundy. And the mask is the story. Theodore Robert Cowell was born on November 24, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont, to an unwed mother named Eleanor Louise Cowell, who gave birth in a home for unwed mothers and initially raised him as her son. For years, Bundy believed his grandparents were his parents and his mother was his sister. When he eventually discovered the truth, the effect it had on him is debated by every psychiatrist who ever examined him. He was intelligent. Deeply so. He studied psychology at the University of Washington, a choice that, in retrospect, feels almost too on the nose. He worked on a political campaign. He volunteered at a crisis hotline in Seattle alongside Ann Rule, a woman who would later write one of the most famous true crime books ever published about the man she considered a friend. He had girlfriends. He had friends. He had a future that, from the outside, looked entirely normal. But underneath, something had been building for years. Bundy later described an obsession with violent pornography from his early teens. A compulsion he said had grown steadily darker and more consuming. Whether this was true or another calculated performance, another mask worn for a different audience, is impossible to say with certainty. What is certain is that on January 4, 1974, it began. His first confirmed attack was on a young woman asleep in her basement apartment in Seattle. He beat her severely with a metal rod. She survived, but spent weeks in a coma and suffered permanent injuries. He refined his approach quickly. Bundy's method was the same across dozens of attacks. He was charming. He manufactured situations where women felt compelled to help him, a fake cast on his arm, a fake injury, a request for assistance with something near his car. And when they got close enough, he took them. His victims were predominantly young white women with long hair parted in the middle. In several cases he attacked multiple women on the same day, at the same location. On July 14, 1974, a single Sunday afternoon at Lake Sammamish State Park near Seattle, he approached at least 6 different women using the name Ted, wearing a fake arm sling and claiming to need help with his boat. 2 of them, Janice Ott and Denise Naslund, went with him. Both were found dead months later. He killed in Washington, Oregon, Colorado, Utah, Idaho, and finally, Florida. His confirmed victims number at least 20. He confessed to 30. Some investigators believe the true figure may exceed 36. And in early 2026, decades after his execution, Laura Ann M., a 17-year-old murdered in Utah in October 1974, was officially confirmed as one of his victims through advanced DNA testing. Even dead, Bundy is still being held accountable. By 1977, Bundy was in custody in Colorado, awaiting trial for the murder of a nurse named Karen Campbell. He had decided to represent himself, a decision that gave him unprecedented access to the courthouse law library. On June 7, 1977, while unsupervised in that library, he opened a window and jumped from the 2nd floor. He was recaptured 6 days later. Returned to custody. transferred to a more secure facility in Glenwood Springs. He escaped again. On December 31, 1977, he used a hole he had cut through his cell ceiling, having lost enough weight to squeeze through it. His absence was not noticed for 15 hours. By the time anyone realized he was gone, Bundy was on a bus to Chicago. He made his way to Tallahassee, Florida. He rented a room near Florida State University under a false name. And within weeks, he killed again. On the night of January 15, 1978, he entered the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University and attacked 4 women, killing 21-year-old Margaret Bowman and 20-year-old Lisa Levy, and wounding 3 others. 3 weeks later he abducted and murdered 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, the youngest of his confirmed victims. On February 15, 1978, 46 days after his second escape, he was stopped by a police officer in Pensacola, Florida. When the officer ran his plates and realized the car was stolen, Bundy ran. He was tackled and arrested. He would never be free again. The trial of Ted Bundy for the Chi Omega murders began in Miami in 1979. He represented himself, standing in a courtroom, cross-examining the survivors of his attacks, performing for cameras with the same charisma he had used to lure his victims. The prosecution's most devastating piece of evidence was Bundy's own teeth. Bundy's teeth were compared to bite marks found on one of the Chi Omega victims, and confirmed a match. It was the first time bite mark evidence had been used in a major American murder trial. And it was the evidence that sealed his fate. He was convicted of the Chi Omega murders and sentenced to death. He was subsequently convicted of the murder of Kimberly Leach and received a second death sentence. On death row he married a woman named Carol Boone, who had sat in the courtroom throughout the trial as one of his most devoted supporters. They had a child together while Bundy was on death row. Carol eventually left him, reportedly after he finally admitted the truth about his crimes. In the final days before his execution, Bundy gave a series of confessions, naming victims and locations investigators hadn't known about. He blamed violent pornography for his crimes in an interview with evangelical minister James Dobson, a performance many criminologists dismissed as a final manipulation, an attempt to place responsibility anywhere but himself. He also assisted investigators trying to catch the Green River Killer, offering detailed insights into the mind of a serial killer in recorded sessions with Detective Robert Keppel that Hulu dramatized in a 2025 documentary series. On January 24, 1989, Theodore Robert Bundy was executed in the electric chair at Florida State Prison. He was 42 years old. Outside the prison, people cheered. They held signs. They had driven through the night to be there. The fascination with Ted Bundy has never fully faded. Books, films, documentaries, podcast episodes, entire university courses. He has become a cultural phenomenon in a way that disturbs many of the investigators who knew what he actually was. And what he actually did to the women and girls he killed. What Bundy understood, better than almost any killer before or since, was that the mask was the weapon. That charm was a tool as deliberate and as deadly as anything else he used. That people would see what they expected to see, what they wanted to see, and that he could use that against them. The women he killed were not fooled. They were deceived. By a man who had spent decades perfecting the performance. Subscribe if this case made you think. And leave a comment. Why do you think Ted Bundy continues to fascinate people more than almost any other serial killer in history? Feel better soon if you're watching this while sick, and I'll see you in the next one.